Good afternoon. I'm Tomoko Sakomora, Provost and Acting Co-President of Swarthmore College, and I want to welcome you to our 8th Annual Engaged Scholarship Symposium, hosted by the Eugene M. Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility. As an institution with a mission to provide a transformative liberal arts education, Swarthmore College has a long-standing commitment to the principles that animate engaged scholarship. Intellectual rigor combined with an active dedication to peace, equity, and social responsibility. At Swarthmore, we've been excited to see more and more faculty and administrators committed to engaged scholarship because we believe we joined the movement that will lead our institutions and higher education more generally to meaningful and needed change in the coming decades across the globe. Over the next 3 days, we are proud to be alongside colleagues from 8 other higher education institutions and 3 higher education networks with similar traditions and commitments. The networks are Campus Compact, the Coalition of Urban and Metropolitan Universities, and the Engagement Scholarship Consortium. Our partnering institutions this year are Agnes Scott College, George Washington University, University of South Carolina Upstate, Towson University, Indiana University Indianapolis, Purdue University, Indiana University Bloomington, and Texas A&M University. Swarthmore College is so honored to be hosting this esteemed group. Thank you so much for joining us. And I would like to turn it over to Ben Berger, our Executive Director of the Eugene M. Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility. Thank you.
My video has stopped there. Well, thanks, Tomoko. I'm not sure if my video is visible, but that's okay. I'm Ben Berger, Associate Professor of Political Science at Swarthmore College. I'm the Executive Director of the Eugene M. Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility. I'm so glad everyone was able to join us here today. I think maybe the video started now. Great. So I'm always just delighted to be here with the various leaders in engaged scholarship nationally that we've been able to convene. Each year we begin by pointing to Ernest Boyer's original intention for the term engaged scholarship to describe teaching and research that connect the rich resources of the university to our most pressing social, civic, and ethical problems. Now, that definition has evolved and expanded over the last couple of decades to include the importance of addressing problems with those affected by them, collaboration and co-creation of knowledge alongside community partners. And I think you're going to hear a lot about that over the next 3 days. During the last 2 years, we've convened scholars and community partners from a range of national engaged scholarship leaders in a variety of institutional categories, leading public and private research universities, leading minority-serving institutions, leading regional colleges and universities, and leading liberal arts colleges, a category we hope fits Swarthmore as well. We learned tremendously from working with this diverse set of peers. And here's a theme of this year's presentations, just like last year. Last year, we realized that one of the things that our diverse partners have in common is membership in various network organizations. The networks we're highlighting with this year's symposium are not going to be strangers to anyone here. Campus Compact, Coalition of Urban and Metropolitan Universities, CUMU, and the Engagement Scholarship Consortium, ESC, as Tomoko already mentioned. Last year, we, for the first time, made collaboration itself and the collaborative power of networks the overarching network theme, and we're continuing that this year. But this year also, the themes of our individual sessions over the next 3 days are themselves dictated by the collaborative's recent directions. Today with Campus Compact, you'll see lifting up the work of emerging scholars who are going to be shaping the evolving field of engaged scholarship over the coming decades. Tomorrow, Wednesday, with CUMU, our presenters will be lifting up the public-facing and knowledge-disseminating elements of engaged scholarly work. And on Thursday, with the Engagement Scholarship Consortium, we'll hear from recent winners of ESC grants and awards and the kinds of things for which they've been recognized. Again, from Swarthmore's perspective, we benefit tremendously from being not just in conversation over these 3 days, but from being members in these coalitions. They magnify all their members' resources and capabilities, and they represent gathering places, both virtually and in person, where we can exchange perspectives and best practices with those from institutions like ours and also those with quite different environments. So without further ado, I want to begin session one, titled Where We Go From Here, a conversation with emerging scholars, and turn things over to today's moderator, my friend and colleague, Nicole Springer, Senior Director of Professional Development Scholarship and Chief Equity Officer at Campus Compact. Over to you, Nicole.
Well, thank you, Ben. Always a pleasure to work with you and to work with everyone at the Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility. These last few years have been a tremendous value add for me as a continuing scholar, and especially for those of us, for those our participants in our Engaged Scholars Initiative. So I don't need to give any more of my titles because, well, that's the joy of my life. But I do want to share just a little bit about Campus Compact and this Engaged Scholars Initiative. So Campus Compact is a national coalition of 2-year, 4-year public and private institutions that are representing the full spectrum of higher education. We advance the public purposes of colleges and universities, and we take a comprehensive approach to support the whole institution, senior leaders, faculty, staff, and students. We hope to build knowledge, skills, and capacity for civic and community engagement. Higher education's publicly engaged mission has never been more important or more necessary, which we have learned more and more these recent years. So throughout our nearly 40-year history, next year is our 40th anniversary, or we'll be 40 years old, however you want to think about it, anniversary or birthday. Campus Compact has asserted that institutions of higher education hold a vital responsibility to serve, collaborate with, and learn from their communities. Now facing unprecedented challenges as a field and as people, we remain confident that the public mission of higher education is a critical component to solving society's most pressing dilemmas and building a just democracy. Part of that work, and a large part of that work, is building the foundational scholarship and leadership capacity for early career community engagement practitioners and professionals. The Engaged Scholars Initiative is one of our signature programs designed for that purpose. The goals of this program are to develop a diverse group of early career scholar practitioners, advance equity and full participation, foster community engaged scholarship, and do all of this to contribute to the field of higher education, civic, and community engagement. Each year, a cohort of about 14 to 16 scholars are selected to be a part of this national cohort. This cohort is designed to be as diverse as possible in location, institution type, race, gender, and so while they're early faculty and staff, we currently meet once a month, but that will increase next year as this year's cohort has suggested that maybe they need a little bit more time with each other. So additionally, we get to hang out in person twice a year with this year's final retreat at Swarthmore College. So you'll learn a little bit more about the program as we hear from our panelists, because that's why you're here today. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and we are going to start, as I promised them, in alphabetical order by first name. I didn't tell them which of it's first or last name. So by first name. So Blaine, if you would start us out.
Thank you, Nicole. My name is Blaine McDonald. I'm the Assistant Director for Service Learning and Civic Engagement at Agnes Scott College. What my role essentially is all of our service and also all of our community engagement and democratic engagement. So working with our students to get into the community, and then also providing voter education, voter registration opportunities. We also house our student organizations and all of our signature programming in my office. So we are very busy in the CLES.
Hi, I'm Jody Joyner from Swarthmore College. I'm an assistant professor of art here, and my job involves teaching courses in sculpture and installation, environmental sculpture to undergraduate students in the context of a liberal arts college. So that means getting to work with majors, non-majors across a variety of different really exciting courses.
And last but certainly not least, there's me, Miranda Ward. I'm an assistant professor and director of equity in the Department of Clinical Research and Leadership, which is at the George Washington University School of Medicine, Health Sciences. And I am, one of the ESI cohort members, and really excited that, because of the work that I do at teaching undergrads public health and all of the courses that I teach are designated by our Honey Nashman Center for Civic Engagement and Public Service in the registrar's office as community engaged. And so students who value community engagement literally can go through the bulletin of classes and actually see that designation and decide that, you know what, I want to enroll in that course. And then it also just introduces other students who otherwise may not really know or value or understand community engagement by enrolling in the course. But I also would describe myself as a community engaged scholar. So even though I design health equity curriculum, and so, you know, if you design curriculum, you're not teaching all of those courses, right? So I teach my courses, but there are other courses that other faculty take on, and they share how they don't always feel comfortable or confident talking about, you know, kind of value-laden discussions like around social disadvantage or sectional forms of oppression. So that's why I do lots of faculty development too. And so I'm excited to talk about some of the work that I've been doing underway with the, you know, with being part of this cohort this year.
Thank you. So I'm just going to start right off with questions. I know that I believe you've been asked as participants to put your questions in the chat, and we will get to those as we can. We'll also leave some time at the end for questions and answers. So Jody, we'll start with you. The Engaged Scholars Initiative requires its participants to work on a scholarly project, which causes sometimes a little bit of stress for folks. But could you tell us briefly about how your project has developed or changed over the course of the program?
Yes, my project is called House of the Living, and it's a collaborative public artwork that commemorates and honors victims of homicide in the greater Philadelphia region. And it's a project that I'm collaborating on with another faculty member, Ron Tarver, in the art department here at Swarthmore, and we have two community partners. An urban agriculture organization, Farmer John, that we're working with, and a victim services organization called Every Murder is Real. And our project actually started back in 2022. So I started over the course of the program. Actually, at the beginning of the fall, we came into it with like all gears running. We were wrapping up a lot of work from the summer with summer research students and preparing for a public opening and kind of the completion of phase 1 of the project. So we were able to, in the fall, open the project to the public. There are about 300 people who attended, which was really exciting. Family members, community members. We received a lot of press about the project in the Philadelphia area, which was also really rewarding. And then kind of in the spring, in a sort of non-linear fashion, we've actually sort of been reassessing how we're going to move into phase 2 of the project. Because a number of the grants that we had actually applied for earlier on, they're not coming through, and we've been getting really good public feedback about the project. So we're kind of trying to figure out why and reassess, and perhaps restructure some things about our project actually. So I would say that my project journey it's definitely a very non-linear one at the moment.
Thank you. That tends to happen.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Miranda, what about your project?
So I'm actually part of Truckin', which is the Research University's Community Engaged Network, which I would describe as, and Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, is it like a subsidiary of Campus Compact? I know it's like connected. Okay, great. So one of the things that, so basically if you think of yourself as, you know, a community engaged scholar, if that's something you are or you aspire to be, you can join, you know, this research network if you are at an R1. And basically they created these sustained communities so that, you know, we have the annual meeting before the Campus Compact meeting, and that's like, you know, you meet once, but you want to remain in community, almost like a community of practice throughout the course of the year. And so I served as a co-chair of the sustained conversation group that was focusing on bringing an equity lens to community engaged research. And so the project was really, you know, came in a couple of parts. You know, we really wanted to ensure that we provided resources, just because I feel like one of the things we talked about was the fact that what counts as community engagement, or, you know, what community engaged scholarship, has not been defined or described in a uniform way from one university to the next. And so one of the things that we were talking about was maybe we can come up with a toolkit on how to, you know, think about community engaged research, and how to, you know, kind of stand up the work that you're doing in a way that your institution would value, you know, so that it's not just, you know, considered as service, but also very much your scholarship. And then we decided, you know what, why don't we, instead of just deciding amongst ourselves in our small group, why don't we poll the membership and see, you know, where their interest lies. So we put together a poll, we sent it out to the membership and asked, you know, a list of, you know, what type of resources would be really helpful for you as you think about your own community engaged research. And literally the one that bubbled up to the top was really applying an anti-racist and decolonizing lens to research. And we're like, okay, so let's pivot. So people don't really need to, you know, define community engaged research. Instead, they're doing community engaged research, but what they want to do is be more intentional with their anti-racist values and applying that lens. So, okay, that sounds great. So that's what we decided to do as a committee. And we decided, you know what would really be helpful is if we had we really kind of poured into and mentored like a pipeline. So we created a fellowship for graduate students, and I basically recruited 3 graduate students here at GW to serve as Truckin' Fellows. And I basically, you know, it was a very kind of competitive process. We put out a call and got so much interest. And so that's very telling of grad students that have an interest in this type of work. So it's like, you know, not waiting until you become faculty members to value this work, but, you know, in that pipeline of really developing their lines of inquiry. And so I really have appreciated the opportunity to really mentor and guide graduate students. We have 2 master's students and a doctoral student that's working as a Truckin' Fellow on this project. And we've been able to put together a repository of resources, and we literally outline the research process, like starting off with being reflective and, you know, kind of reflexivity as a researcher, your positionality, moving into your research questions, moving into the research design, thinking about funding and dissemination and partners, you know, who you're going to partner with, and sharing data and sharing power, like literally all of these kind of areas. And we had like a whole bunch of resources within each of those areas. So to Jody's point, my project hasn't been linear either, but I actually appreciate that. You know, I appreciate that there was ebbs and flows, and you basically pivot as you need to, because what we wanted to do is, you know, we wanted to follow the needs of the, you know, of the membership, of like what other community engaged scholars say they actually need. So it's definitely been I will say it's been a pleasure, really kind of serving in that leadership capacity, and then really allowing for some mentorship of younger scholars to do similar research.
Excellent. And Blaine?
Yeah, I would say I've had to pivot as well. I would say this started because I wanted to bring actual service learning to Agnes Scott. What we were / are a little bit still doing, we're doing service, absolutely, and some faculty are doing a little bit of service learning, but we're not necessarily calling it that. We're not giving it a certificate, anything like that. And so I wanted to, you know, engage with this group to start service learning at Agnes Scott, actually call it that, potentially give it a certificate, and then also, you know, continue to grow that and expand that. So throughout the year, we've had a couple of different things come through that I thought may work. Some did not, but most recently, probably end of 2023, beginning of 2024, the city of Decatur came to us and said, hey, we would love to expand our partnerships, specifically around the Climate Resilience Plan Task Force, and really work to engage, you know, Decatur residents throughout the year on house maintenance, etc., rather than just doing it during a weekend service project, which usually is held around MLK Service Day. So we said, okay. And that is kind of what has taken us to this next level of really developing curriculum around a service learning project for that. Because I said, I would love to provide volunteers for that, but we're going to need more structure and we're going to need more students to be more engaged in this for that sustainable and consistent service you're needing from us. And so we're still developing the curriculum. I believe we're going to try to host the actual class in spring 2025. And right now, we are hiring an AmeriCorps Vista to help us develop that curriculum and help us expand service learning and help us expand that climate resilience task force with the city of Decatur and all of our community partners. We literally had our first interview this morning. And so I'm really excited about that Vista, and that Vista is through Campus Compact.
Thank you. So one of the great things about the Engaged Scholars Initiative, and as we talk about community engaged scholarship, is that community looks different and can look different for each scholar. And so being able to craft their scholarly project to fit their needs and the needs of their communities is fantastic. And they always change. And I think that's, like Miranda said, the beauty of this work, right, is that part of it is going with what the community wants and what the community needs. And that means that nothing looks the same from day to day. The other another part of our work as engaged in the Engaged Scholars Initiative is to really center equity in all that we do. And so the question that I have, and we'll start with Miranda this time, is why or how is equity important in your work as a scholar practitioner?
Okay, so I've been told in the chat that there were some people who were having a hard time hearing me. So let me know if you can hear me. I'm gonna try to get close to the mic. I put the volume up as high as it can go, so hopefully that'll quell that concern. But equity, diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, anti-racism, belonging, accessibility, respect, decolonization. These are all values of mine, right? These are not topics for me. These are not something that I just talk about and in a Zoom meeting and then log off and go back to my regularly scheduled program. I have emotional investments here. These are things that I'm often thinking about because have all of these degrees, been in school for 24 years, right? And none of these, these degrees are not protecting me from discrimination, and it's not protecting me from, a range of systems of oppression. So I, have always just committed myself to translating the values that I have based also on my lived experience into curriculum, into my research, into the classroom. And so that's always just been really integral to who I am. And so that's why, it literally comes up in, literally in everything that I do. And so I do think of these values as a positioning, as a stance, that's really important. And so I often, when I talk about equity, I know that in this social, cultural, and geopolitical moment, there's a tendency to think of equity as a zero-sum game where equity feels oppressive to some people. They feel like I am giving something away to make some, like some people are going to give something away to ensure that other people have. And that is absolutely not what equity is, even though that's the way equity gets positioned often. And if you think about the fact that equity benefits everyone, if we really understand that, we have to think of the most marginalized, overlooked, socially disadvantaged group and remove barriers for them. And then the thing is that even if it wasn't a complete barrier for you, it may have been challenging because it is an obstacle. So if we think about the communities that, are most disadvantaged and most marginalized, and we remove those barriers for them, there's a ripple effect, right? Everyone benefits from that. And so those are the types of conversations that I like to have when I talk to a range of faculty in the medical enterprise who may feel like, well, why should I care about conversations around equity and inclusion? I work in laboratory science, right? Like, how does that affect the work that I'm doing, right? Or I'm not kind of patient facing, or I work with people, and it's kind of like, no, absolutely, no matter what field, what type of work that you do, these are a set of values that we should personally hold. But if you don't personally hold them, our institution does. And so because our institution does value that, and we're trying to create a climate, we're trying to create and, a new culture and a new climate. We want everyone to be on board and have these shared values and understanding. So that does show up in our work, because we know that, the work that all of us do, literally, whatever the biases that we hold, whatever the worldviews that we hold, that literally gets codified in our work. And then, so even if you feel like, well, I'm not interacting directly with people, again, you're developing an algorithm, you're developing, protocols, like that is going to affect the human condition. And this is why you should care, right? So these are some of the wonderings that, are not limited to the conversation here, but, kind of reverberate in conversations more broadly. So thank you for that question.
And then popping over to Blaine.
Yeah, I would say I took this question very literally to my work with students and then also my work with community partners. So 40% of our students are Pell eligible and 60% of our students are students of color. And so I'm always thinking about how I can make service and civic engagement more equitable, more accessible for all of our students. So what that looks like to me is baseline. I'm always providing transportation. I'm always providing a meal and potentially other things for essentially everything that I'm doing. So whether that's we're going into the community, we're doing something on campus, I'm just always trying to provide those very baseline things. So if my students are giving me their time and their effort, I'm at least giving them, access and easily accessed ways to engage. The other part of that is, I'm always thinking about how are we equitably engaging with our community partners. I think the very first thing that I try to do is ask just what they need. Never trying to come in and say, this is what we can do for you. It's all about what they need from us and what we can do to help them and what we can do to uplift them. And like I said earlier, I'm just always trying to create sustainable and consistent service. Part of me engaging with this program, we were doing a lot of like 1-day type service opportunities, which is okay for maybe first years to see what's out there and maybe see what they like. But we really need to engage the community further and get really consistent, sustainable service to work with the community, to uplift the community together. And so I'm always thinking about that part with community partners as well.
And I'm going to talk about equity in relationship to my specific field of visual art. And one of the reasons why I think it is so important to engage with community-based work in visual art is because art, I think, it's not great historically at policy change, but it's really good and has a lot of power in the realm of the symbolic in order to like change representation, to change what stories are visible in public space, what stories are highlighted in public space, and to really model collaborative authorship in real time. So that's something that we've really been trying to do through House of the Living. And when I mean collaborative authorship, I mean that in specifically in our project, that's happened between faculty members, it's happened between our community partners and ourselves, it's happened with students and also with all of the families who have a loved one who's commemorated in the project. So we meet really regularly with families. We do interviews with them and have had a lot of different kinds of participatory design, conversations, charrettes, etc. And I think, yeah, art has the ability to really kind of show what like decentering the self as author can look like when you try to engage in a model where like, most of the people involved in our project don't consider themselves artists, and yet they're making art that contributes to this much larger project that's beyond any one person. So
And then also, I'm sorry, Nicole, let me just add a couple of more things. Well, this is not related to my scholarly project as part of, being a member of the ESI cohort, but this is something that I'm working on. And so putting together a structural racism curriculum for medical students. And the thing is that, that's not novel in and of itself, right? But to the question around, well, how do you translate your values for equity in the work that you do? Well, going back to what both Jody and Blaine were talking about of, what counts as knowledge and whose knowledge, one of the things that we were really intentional in doing was actually inviting community members to actually share their expertise. And so it was a twofold thing where we really wanted to, have a paradigm shift so that when medical students think about community members, it's not always on the receiving end of service, right? So they actually can view and interact with community members as experts. And so the community members actually, were in this course teaching them about their experiences with racism and gentrification and, displacement, and really, again, allowing for just like to really humanize the conversations around medical racism, scientific racism, and race-based medicine. And I think that's really important because not only were these community members invited to be, to be interviewed and create these, like a docuseries, these video, it was like a visual narrative, but they were also invited to serve on our community advisory board. So, it's one thing to share your story and then you don't know how your story is used. You don't know whatever happened with that. It's like, no, actually, here's your story and this is how we're going to use it. So they review and approved and offer feedback on, what should be, how we should expand, the content and like for the medical students, the type of discussion questions, and then ultimately received the actual video so that they actually can use that for the work that they do at their community-based organization. So literally we're, integrated into the process and not just, there was reciprocity there, right? So it's not like, okay, thank you so much for your story, and then now we're going to go use it and have it packaged up as a curriculum, but most certainly be attributed to the work that they're doing, and they get to vet it, and they get to use it, right? So we'll talk about shared power, shared understanding. So that's one of those ways, and I think that's so incredibly powerful so that medical students can see, and other health profession students, but in particular, we've been doing this with medical students, can see that, what counts as knowledge, and, they can't only learn from, somebody with a white medical coat or someone who has a doctoral degree, right? So to equally value these different forms of expertise is really important. And then one last thing I'll say, because I know I'm taking up a lot of time, is the fact that the Social Mission Alliance, for those of you who aren't familiar, they basically, it's like 200 different like medical schools and dental schools and nursing schools that really want to live their social mission, and they come up with metrics to do that. So they had their meeting last week in Durham, and I was in one of those working group meetings, and we were really talking about, in the event that we have people, community members come to campus and do a lecture, are they compensated for their time? And someone was like, oh yeah, we give them parking, or oh, we give them, we make sure they get food or something like that. So it's kind of like, let's be very clear on what compensation is, right? Parking is harm mitigation. Food is harm mitigation, but compensation, right? So I think that's a whole conversation. I was like, I love this conversation. Like, we need to really dive into this because I'm a part of some different university like committees, and we really need to think through, what value we're placing on the time and the expertise of community members.
Thank you. Actually, that's a good way to move into our next question, which you all talk about sort of valuing different types of knowledge, right? Asking people what they want, really. You've talked about reciprocity, you've talked about increased voice. And we are all at higher education institutions, and there's been sort of a way in which these institutions have operated over time. And so as you think about the way that you engage equity in your work, have you come up against any challenges as you try to uplift your value of equity within your institution?
I can start
I
with
honestly
this
don't
one.
remember where I am.
It's okay. I'll start with this one. I think the biggest challenge I've had is that we or the biggest pushback, I'll say that, is that we are not having the challenging conversations we need to have, I think. And actually, this week at Campus Compact, I got engaged with a lot of people who are having those conversations, and I'm going to bring that back and be like, hey, actually, we can do this. But I think that's the biggest pushback. It's just that we are, I don't know if it's necessarily fear or just kind of not wanting to give that dialogue and have those hard conversations and give students that voice that they need. But I think that is the biggest pushback that I get, is just we're not willing quite yet to have those hard conversations, really dig deep into the issues that are going on. And ultimately, I think we're going to have to do that this fall. My role is service. My role is also democratic engagement. And to get my students democratically engaged, we are going to have hard conversations about what's going on in the world and how that impacts them. And obviously those will be bipartisan, and I just want them to actually get out and vote. But we're going to have those hard conversations, and we're going to have to talk about the things that are going on.
So then I'll say that there's two areas that really have been like a sticking point with the community partners that I work with. One of them is the IRB. Unfortunately, the IRB was not designed with community in mind. And earlier, Jody was talking about participatory, research models again. That, the IRB is designed for traditional, right, research models. And so if you're doing something that's participatory and you're trying to share, you're like, okay, no, this community member is a co-PI, or they're co-researchers, and like they don't understand, again, thinking there's a focus on like the titles and who can serve in these roles and who could be a PI, and going through the city. And again, I am all for protections, right? We know like the whole purpose of the IRB. So I understand why, if we're going to call yourself, a PI or, a researcher on this, there needs to be, some accountability to making sure that the data is secure and risk are, minimized, and these things. And also recognize the challenge and the kind of disincentive to have community members serve in these capacities when there's just like a litany of like quizzes and tests and certifications and like things that they need to complete in order to like, be processed and things like that. I'm like, oh my God, like who's gonna do all this, right? I mean, we have to do it because we're like academics, but like they're not academics. So like, I just feel like there needs to be some type of other processes considered. And similarly with going back to compensation, right? Secure grant funds, you have the money, you tell people, oh, I'm going to offer you this honorarium or this stipend or this, whatever the form of compensation is. And we have offices that take forever. Multiple, like, okay, a vendor application, do this. It's just like very, just like these bureaucratic, antiquated models that really make it difficult for community members who have done the work and now, are waiting and waiting and waiting to get paid. And I just feel like that's so inequitable. And I hate that. And I've often been like the go-between where they're like, oh, it's like, where's my payment? I'm just like trying to reach out to the office. They're like, oh, you got to get approval. It's just like all of these factors that I feel like really make it difficult when we say that we're a university that values, community, and we want to be in community and we want to engage in community, but then we have processes that don't align with those values, that really actually undermine those values. So I think that those have been the main sticking points for me.
Yeah, and at Swarthmore, I feel really super lucky to have the support of the Lang Center, because that has been truly incredible in relationship to this project. One challenge that we have encountered actually has been around our project is not on college land. It's on land that's leased by one of our community partners, the Urban Agriculture Organization. And so it turns out that that's been a little bit tricky, because then the college does not want to be named on like legal documents related to that, or like memorandums of understanding, stuff like that, because of liability and things of that nature. So that'll be interesting to see, like, moving forward, how we might be able to shift that, or what kind of relation, what does it mean to have a project that's cited off campus, like in a community, and how the college like kind of will or will not like officially participate in it. Yeah.
So Jody, I know one of the things that's been helpful on our end, but I think that we've experienced something similar. It's not related to land, but it's just related to the term partnership. Is like
Yeah.
a legal term.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I found is like moving to collaboration versus partnership has allowed for me and the work that I'm doing sometimes to bypass the MOA and all the legal documents, and that's like, the risk, compliance and risk management office has to, all of the offices that have to like do their, that things. I feel like that was one of the ways that we were able to get over that, and just say, oh, we're collaborating with this group or that. And then like collaboration doesn't require signatures and all of that, but a partnership is legal, and then now it does, right? So I feel like, and again, sometimes you actually do want to be a partner. So like, I'm not saying like, oh, just remove all partnerships and be collaborators. I'm just saying that sometimes when like time is of the essence and you don't have the bandwidth to go through all that, then sometimes for this project we'll collaborate on it. So
yeah, no, thanks. That's really interesting and really helpful.
Thank you. And it also, again, moves us into our next question. I do want to highlight something that Maria put in the chat, and I think it was specifically when Miranda was speaking, but I think it goes to what we were just talking about, the hurdles and the challenges and the ways in which the academy works. And what they said was those hurdles make it hard to establish and deepen trust, right? Which is really a key part of working with and collaborating with communities. And so as you think about that, and you think about the work that you do and your ways of incorporating equity, your ways of engaging community, what are some best practice that you use in your own scholarship or practice that you would share with others? And these could be best practices. These could be also, as Miranda pointed out, tips and tricks you learn along the way that perhaps aren't quote unquote evidence-based, but they're things that really help to build trust and engage with community. And so whoever wants to go first.
I can go first on this one, and say that actually it's related to some things Miranda brought up about like working in a really value-driven way. Like we have ongoing conversations with our community partners about our values and our project and in the work that we're doing, and with us, our like students who work on the project as well. And we revisit them often. Not only like collaborative decision making, which in real time I think kind of means like that we've found that we really need to meet often, like almost every week, to stay in really good communication around our project, and so that we can actually make decisions collaboratively, but also collaborative leadership. Like each of our groups leads a different part of the project. Like EMIR, Every Murder is Real Healing Center, they of course are leading the work with the families that the project aspires to serve. And so for instance, in an environmental sculpture class that I taught last spring that worked really extensively on this project, they very generously like worked with students to develop trauma-informed interview practices with a social worker from their organization, so that then students could actually be the ones leading the interviews with family members. And that process like took the entire semester. We met several times. The interviews happened at the very end and kind of rolled into the summer. The urban agriculture organization that we're working with, they lead kind of the the infrastructural greenhouse, like as well as how the project's gonna interface into their programming. And then my colleague Rana and I, we're definitely kind of facilitating the art part of it. And so I think it's actually been really like reassuring to have that kind of decentered model of leadership, because everybody's like areas of expertise really thrive and really have a lot to contribute. And it's, I think, allowed students to kind of find their footing in their areas of expertise in the project as well. to kind of frame like what their best contributions could be. So I think I'll stop there.
So I guess I'll go next. I guess, I'll start with, if you didn't measure it, did it happen? And I feel like that, thinking about the assessing our reach, but also assessing our impact. I think that's so important when we start to think about being in community. And just like having like that kind of ongoing feedback loop. So on the one hand, thinking about reach, and I really appreciate that at GW, our National Center convenes. I mean, we also have Carnegie classification. So they have what's called the Give Post site, which is not unique to GW. Like lots of different, institutions rely on this platform, is what it's the best way to describe it, to assess, like to have everything in one place, right? So it's designed for reciprocal relationships with the community. So not only can the community members log into the site, but your institution can log into the site, and you see the list of all of the community organizations that that you partner with. And so do your students. They can log on and see like, okay, where are all the different sites? What are all the requirements to serve there? The community members will literally post, okay, here's the description. You need a background check or not, or, volunteer orientations on a Saturday at 9, like whatever the details are about that project. If it's a one-time project, here it is. If it's service learning and connected to a course, here's the course, and you have to enroll and contact that person. So all of the details are just in one place and makes it nice and streamlined, but also the students can log their impact, right? They can, so we actually have like, we can see the number of hours that students are serving, where we have like maps where you can see like where our students are, because DC is divided into 8 wards, and GW is in Ward 2, and so we can see like, is most service happening right by campus at Ward 2 or elsewhere? So you literally have a map and you see the little pins of where they are, so it shows us our reach and things like that. But then also assessing impact on the community as well as the student with like some of those kind of open-ended questions that the students actually respond to once they log their hours, and make that available to the community partner. So again, there's reciprocity. So it's not just, oh, we came, we did the service, and the community partner never heard back from that, whatever happened with that, right? There's again like a feedback loop there. So I think that's one best practice. So, any institution who's not already, I mean, not to say you have to use Give Posts, but something like that, something that offers you an opportunity to assess what you're doing. But also I think it's really important to adequately prepare students and faculty to enter community, because what you don't want is for them to bring harm, right? What you don't want is the paternalistic kind of outlook and perspective on, oh, I'm here to give, and it's like, okay, wait. So just having some training and preparation on what is really understanding the history, the rich history and culture of the communities that you're going to be serving in, and do some reflection and introspection into your own identities and power and privilege. Like all of those kind of preparatory discussions are necessary when it comes to going and working in and with community. And I think that that's just a necessity as far as like a best practice. You most certainly need to do that, because without doing that, people have different intentions, and again, they don't necessarily know like how to engage with community members in ways that are not genuine, and allow for like a rapport to be established, especially if your institution doesn't have a long-standing history of having a meaningful, trustworthy relationship with the community. You most certainly need to understand that legacy, right, of mistrust or distrust, and ensure that you aren't contributing to that, or basically exacerbating that by continuing to send students and faculty out without that understanding. So I think those are the 2 best practices I would offer.
I'm essentially going to echo Miranda and Jody. But just a side note, our Give Pulse is called Scotty Serve, and I use it almost on a daily basis to show impact, etc. So yes, that's an awesome tool. I think the first 2 things I would say is collaboration. Like we've talked about several times here, I collaborate all of the time. I could not do most of my work without collaboration. in fact, all of the work with the service learning course and with the Vista to help us develop that is in collaboration with the Office of Sustainability here, just because it is with the Climate Resilient Task Force. And we are working together to develop that course and bring on the Vista. So collaboration, I think, is number one. Number two is to show up, I think, for our community partners. So if they are asking us to come and support them somewhere, come and do something for them, I really try to get out in the community and do that. And I try to bring students as well. An example, they're building a new charm facility, which is a center for hard to recycle materials, right in our backyard. They've asked us for the second year to come be the main volunteers for that event. And it's just a kids event to show kids how to recycle, show kids what sustainability means. And we're going to go do that. And so I think, answering the call to your community and showing up where you're needed is just very, very important. The other things are just the things that we've already mentioned. I'm always trying to listen to my students. I'm always trying to listen to our community, and I'm always trying to continue to build relationships. And those are all of my best practices.
Thank you. So I just want to notify our participants or attendees that I'm about to ask the last of the prepared questions. And so I will be looking to the chat to get some of your questions for the panelists after they answer this final question. And the final question that I have for you is so what are some key takeaways from the ESI program that you've been able to use at your home institutions or that you plan to use at your home institutions? So what are you currently able to do, or what are some things you plan to do based on the takeaways from the ESI program?
I can start with this one. I sit in student affairs, and so it is really great for me to work with faculty in this program, and really learn that I can go across that academic and student affairs barrier, and make some allies, and really that a lot of faculty members also think this work is really relevant and really essential. And so that's a huge takeaway for me, is just that student affairs and academic affairs can work together. They do work together, and kind of thinking through what that looks like at my own institution. Always thinking about how I can make service learning and my work kind of more relevant. And I think this program helped just validate me in that. We're all kind of working in service and kind of working in the community. And so it was really great to have peers who are doing very similar work to me. And to make those connections kind of across the country. I'm at a very small college right outside of Atlanta. And so making connections with people at other institutions like mine or at huge universities was a really great thing to be able to do.
I will say for me, I think it's a little bit too soon to tell actually, because my project is in this period of like real reassessment. And that it's also a really long-term project. I will say that I think kind of in the very present tense, like it's helpful to have people to just kind of talk with about your projects who are engaged in similar kinds of work. Like already today, I learned something from Miranda, and Blaine, I remember when we were talking about your climate resilience project and some of like the ups and downs of that. And so it gives you kind of like definitely strength in numbers to know that, yeah, you like pivoting, flexibility, adaptability, it's really a part of it in relationship to this like very long-term effort.
Yeah, I echo the sentiments from Blaine and Jody, that it's just the sense of community, like again, that community of practice that we developed as a cohort, and being able to kind of be a sounding board for each other, bounce ideas off of each other, share, things that are working for us, things that we feel, challenged by, and just having, that listening ear, but also like, oh, but this has worked for me. Have you considered that? So I think that sense of community is invaluable for the type of work that we're all leading. And then also, there's just always more to know, right? And we'll never just arrive, right? Like, oh, and we got it, right? It's just just given what we know so far and what we've been tripped up, behind so far. There's just so much more to know, to learn, to unlearn. And what better way to do it than, with a group of peers that also have similar commitments.
Hey, well, I see that there are no questions from the attendees, but I have a ton of questions. And so, oh, one just came. So you're spared from my question. This is a question from Kathleen. Are there any key reading resources for supporting the hard conversations prior to engaging in community work that y'all love?
I'll say that we're actually putting together a toolkit chock full of resources, including articles and courses and books and websites and podcasts and videos. And so I just couldn't even begin to share. Like, I'm literally looking at our spreadsheet right now. There's just so many. So I'm happy to make this available to the participants on this call. But that's a great question, right? Because we always can benefit from sharing resources. But I'll say that I think that I know that Nicole actually just published a book, a chapter on anti-racism. And I don't know the exact name of it, so Nicole, feel free to weigh in, but we also have that one listed on our spreadsheet of, like, this is like literally a compendium of so many resources. And one of the things that, when we kind of shared where we are with things at Truckin', one of the things that people share will be helpful is, while it's helpful to kind of put all of this together for someone who's new to the process, or it's very specific to, like, well, what do I begin with establishing the relationship? Or actually, I've established a relationship, but I want to know how to disseminate my work, or whatever, wherever you are in the kind of spectrum of community engagement and, and your scholarship and community engagement, is a list of best practices. And for those who are, maybe you don't want to read the full thing, you want more of an executive summary. Like, if there were just, the top, kind of 10, right? Almost to this question, resource book, like, okay, you don't have time to go through the spreadsheet, but like, if you don't have, if you don't do anything else, these are the books, these are the articles, these are the go-to kind of resources. And we were like, we love that. So it's almost like an executive summary to like a toolkit, right? And so we're working on that.
One book I really love in relationship to like teaching in a creative discipline is called The Anti-Racist Writing Workshop, How to Decolonize the Creative Classroom. Great resource.
I'm trying to find something that I just attended maybe 2 weeks ago. American University is working on some very specific work in training and hard conversations. And I just attended a webinar with them. The woman's name is Lanita Johnson, but I cannot find their website. Once I find it, I'll put it in the chat. That has been super helpful for me in preparing for the fall and preparing for all the things that we'll be doing. And I think that would be really helpful to even just start.
So while we're on the topic, thank you very much for your words and for your resources, and there's for people to look in the chat for them as they're coming along. But I think one of the things that's interesting is all of our work is we were talking about community engagement. And sometimes it's the very beginning of this that folks are sometimes hesitant about or unsure how to move forward with, and that's finding a community partner. or finding the community with whom you'd like to work. And so if you could each maybe talk a little bit about how you found or the community partner or community that you are engaging with, how that sort of relationship came to be, and then maybe a little bit on how you continue to nurture it because of the differences maybe with academia. So really about the beginnings, because we talk about, supporting the hard conversations prior to engaging in community work. But there also is this idea that, we need to be able to engage with community, and how do those relationships begin? And so if we could talk a little bit about that.
So for me, it's like, which one comes first? Like, am I an academic who works and lives in community, or am I a community member who, is also who's an academic? And so, and the reason why I say that is for those of you who may be unfamiliar with Washington, D.C., like I said before, is divided into 8 wards, and historically wards 7 and 8 have been historically disinvested, and those also happen to be the parts of DC that are majority Black, and a good portion of Ward 7 and 8 is east of the Anacostia River. And so it almost feels like a tale of two cities. And the reason why I'm bringing this context up is because I've been very intentional in living in that part of DC. And so I live in Ward 7, and I've been very active, very civically engaged. I was, one of the elected advisory neighborhood commissioners, which basically means that you have constituents in your neighborhood that vote for you to represent them locally. And so because I've been very involved in that way, I have a youth nonprofit in the city. I am, just always at community meetings, civic association meetings. I just know a lot of organizations in DC, and, I've been working in DC and living in DC for almost 2 decades. So for those reasons, I have this GW affiliation. And so people already know Miranda, and then, okay, now also you're a GW, right? So again, like I said, which comes first? Is it, community, or is it the university? So I feel like because I've just been so steeped in community, now that I have roles representing, basically being on the mayor's commission for health equity, really advocating for the neighborhoods within Ward 7 and 8, I just feel like I have the trust of so many different organizations, just because they see me at community meetings, right? They see the work that I'm doing, and I'm always inviting community to come to GW and taking GW students into communities, right? So I feel like because of that visibility, that has lent itself to wanting to partner with GW, and if they otherwise hadn't considered it, right? So I've been fortunate in that way that I have that history and the relationship. So I'm able to to rely on that as as an academic.
I would say similarly, I think Agnes Scott has actually been a decent community partner. And so oftentimes people come to us and ask, how can you help us? And so that has been really helpful to me, in that I just answer their call. Essentially, I answer the call, I email them back, and I find out how we can engage with them. There's hardly a community partner that reaches out to me that I just say, hey, I don't think we can do this. I find a student group, a class, anybody that I think would be a good fit, I try to match a community partner with. And so I think very similarly, we just have a kind of history here, where we do try our best to engage with the community. I will say personally, I also engage with the community. I live in Decatur, and I live maybe 5-7 minutes from Agnes Scott, and actually the charm facility that I just talked about that we're going to on Saturday is in my neighborhood. And so, I just try to engage and volunteer and attend, and again, show up to places that I feel like I need to, and places that I've been invited to. In fact, one volunteer, I've tried to even expand how much I volunteer personally, and I may have to miss one day of orientation this week because I've already said that I would volunteer with an organization. And so just doing what we say we're going to do and being there and showing up. I think as an institution and me personally.
And I think I have maybe a slightly different experience in that I moved across the country to start teaching at Swarthmore like about 3 years ago now. So I was very unfamiliar with Philadelphia, and as like an early career scholar and maker, I think something that's been really important actually has been my collaboration with my colleague Ron Tarver, who has lived in Philadelphia for 30 years. The project is sited in the neighborhood where he lives. And so I think that kind of through that, and then also through a lot of like self-education, which has happened through like inviting various gun violence like activist groups around Philadelphia to come and like speak to us. We have gone to meet with them, showing up at events at all of our community partners. And also there's a faculty member at Swarthmore who has been working on a homicide database with his classes in peace and conflict studies here. So like kind of learning more about specific types of knowledge and the community that we're working in, like as I collaborate with someone who has much deeper ties in the community, has been like, I think a way into doing this work like ethically. And like Miranda said, to kind of just be very humble about knowing that there's always a lot more to know, and to be in a place of like learning and seeing oneself more as hopefully like a facilitator, and kind of sticking to my specific areas of expertise within the project and not pretending like I know things that I don't know, you know. Yeah.
So I think what's interesting is that you each have something a little bit different, right? So two of you live in the communities, and are from the communities and have a good base there. And then, Jody, you moved to become a part of a community. When you think about your experiences, both through the Engaged Scholars Initiative and just the work that you're doing, how do you see yourselves playing a change role in your institutions? Or do you feel like do you feel like you could, and how do you see yourself being change agents at your institution? You've each touched on it a little bit, but I'd wonder if you could just dig a little bit deeper into that change agent role that you all seem sort of poised to be and already starting down that path.
Yeah, I'll start with, because like you're right, I did kind of broach that when I was talking about having community members come in and serve as experts within this curriculum. So I think that as far as being a change agent, it's really, like I said, turning the usual kind of paradigm on its head, right? Of, oh, this typically is reserved for GW, like we're the ones that go into the classroom and teach, and then we use the community as our site of practice and training, right? So it's kind of like, actually, you know what, community members actually are teaching us, right? And there's so much that we don't know and need to, like I said, learn and unlearn. And so like that has been very helpful. One, to just basically dismantle that kind of white savior kind of perspective that some students hold. But beyond that, one of the things, since I absolutely, one, I have investments in Ward 7 and 8, I want to introduce students to the rich history and culture of these communities, so that there's not a stigma, that gets maintained about living in Ward 7 and 8. And like I said earlier, the only time they think about Ward 7 and 8 is when it's time for service, right? So it's like when they associate or think about Ward 7 and 8, it's always, there's a very kind of disempowering, pathologizing narrative that, it gets relegated to these parts of the city. And they live and work and play in wards 1 through 6, but service in Ward 7 and 8. It's like, oh, actually, you know what, why don't we go to Ward 7 and 8 to a community meeting, to a museum, to eat, right? Like, just think of Ward 7 and 8 as part of DC, right? And so that we can interrupt this idea that this is the place where you engage in community service, and you always think of, like, in a charitable way, in a humanitarian way, but then the rest of the city is your playground. And so I think that I've been successful in being able to do that by bringing GW students with me to these community meetings and to these events and things like that. And oftentimes they tell me, like, this is my first time in Ward 7 or Ward 8, or this is not anything like, like, I literally teach a class called Applied Health Equity. So it's a group of honor students, and literally last week, that was their assignment. During the course period, we were from 6:10 p.m. to 8:40 is class, like every Monday. During that time, take the train to, and they've each been, like, assigned to a different community partner, to the site of the community partner, right? Walk around the neighborhood, do an asset map, right? So, and it's a way to kind of, like I said, every time you think of, these communities, it's always focused on gap and lack and need. It's like, okay, actually, there's so much ingenuity and there's so many resources in these communities, and, like, what counts as an asset, right? And, like, one of the things that, I was sharing with them is that, there is food insecurity in some of these neighborhoods. And so when we think of what counts as an asset, let's think about what is plentiful. We have so many corner stores. If you think about, if you were to ask someone, okay, identify a community asset, the first thing they might think of is, like, oh, a library or a school or a firehouse or whatever, right? A park. Those are assets. And did you think of a corner store as an asset, right? It's like, well, how is that an asset? Because we have a lot of brick and mortar, that brick and mortar building, there's, like, so many of them, that became an asset, because now we literally can take those corner stores and partner with the Capital Area Food Bank and with DC Central Kitchen, and literally outfit those corner stores to be what we now describe as healthy corner stores, which actually offer fresh produce, in communities that otherwise wouldn't get access to it. So that's an example of how, if you would really think from a community lens, what an asset is, right? and then you can see how you can build on existing assets. So I feel like I've been able to shift some conversations and reframe, understandings of asset-based community development in meaningful and durable ways.
So this came up at the Campus Compact conference as well. And when I was asked it, I essentially just said, I don't think we would be in these roles if we weren't change agents, if we weren't people who wanted to make change, who wanted to push the button maybe a little bit, and make some change at our institutions. And like I said earlier, I do get pushback with that. I think anytime, someone somewhat new, I've been here for almost 2 years, but somewhat new comes in and tries to make some change, you're going to get some pushback. But I think that just always keeping in mind how we're treating our community partners, how our students are engaging with them, and making sure that whatever change I'm making is for the betterment of both, is just what I fall back on. And so, making change is a good thing, or at least it can be, just as long as you kind of have, a North Star to look to, as far as, this is why I'm doing this is why it matters, and this is a button I do need to push.
And I guess I will just add to that I think through House of the Living, I feel like I've gotten to see through kind of the lens of, like, community partners and students, and have experienced it as well, like, that the really kind of transformative nature of, like, working together with so many people on a vision that feels, yeah, both very long term, but, like, there's a lot that can be done kind of every day towards those ends. And it has made me really, like, yeah, want to continue this work, and to, like, really foreground kind of interdisciplinary actions that are happening in the project as well. And I don't know, I think you make change by doing it, and by like, I don't know, I really believe that art has the ability to like envision more just futures, and it just feels good to be in a small way like involved with so many other people on a project that is really working towards those ends.
I should have made that my last question. But I didn't really watch the time well enough. So now I get to ask you more questions. But we'll come back for a wrap up in a couple minutes. Part of this work and part of the work of the Engaged Scholars Initiative is to really bridge scholarship and practice. And you've already been asked one particular question about resources, but more generally, how are you either bridging or melding scholarship and practice in your work at your institutions? So how is scholarship informing your practice, and how is practice maybe informing your scholarship?
No one wants to go first. Okay. So, I mean, I feel like I think I mentioned, let's see, scholarship informing my practice and practice informing my scholarship. So, I mean, I know I keep bringing up the structural racism curriculum, and I already talked about the scholarly project that I'm doing with, you know, as a member of the SI cohort with the toolkit. But, you know, as far as research or scholarship informing my practice, I think that if like for instance, the toolkit, for example, and hopefully you saw that I put that into the chat so you can actually you know, look at it in its current form. By the way, that's going to be on a public facing kind of website in a, you know, aesthetic pleasing way. This just happens to be like the back end, just the, you know, everything like a dump of all the things we found so far. But that's, you know, that's looking through the literature, right? We scoured the literature, and, you know, whether that's peer review literature or that's gray literature, you know, online, to say, you know what, we did the legwork of this is, you know, what is out there that you need to know. And again, that is what you can use to inform your research, your community engagement practices, your teaching, right? So that's how kind of scholarship informs research, where you basically, you know, stay connected to what's recently published, right? And so that you understand the best practices, you understand, you know, some of the questions and wonderings that are, you know, that scholars have, some of the gaps that still exist, right? And then that's where you can come in as a scholar and say, you know what, but we have yet to answer this, or with this particular population, or like that, right? So then you can basically fill in those needs. So, but then thinking about within the practice, does that inform the scholarship? Absolutely, because again, with the curriculum, it's kind of like that is something that we did that we're going to write up and share this as a model for others to consider. You know what, have you ever questioned what counts as expertise? Have you ever, you know, expanded, you know, who gets to, whose perspective is valuable? You know, who gets to, you know, name and frame racism, right? So I think that, you know, it basically goes both ways.
I think for me, there's been kind of almost like a cyclical kind of relationship or something like that, or a back and forth relationship where, for instance, I had the opportunity to offer a course that was about monuments in public space, kind of as this project was also developing. So that was a moment of like deep research, a lot of scholarship, kind of leading then like directly into practice. And then like there's kind of been loops back through other courses. So yeah, it definitely feels like it's not always necessarily happening like simultaneously, but like going through like a deep period of like learning, then doing, learning, then doing, something like that.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think it's very cyclical for me. I think if I'm ever trying to make a change, I try to prepare and get all of the information I possibly can about the change I want to make or the issue I want to improve, whatever that may be. And then I do it, right? I try to make that change, I implement it, and then I try to learn, in that same practice, in that same process, what did go well, what didn't go well. And so it's just this ongoing cyclical process of research and then implementation and then a little bit more research and then implementation and just trying to um, always be a sponge and always learn from anybody we're working with, including students.
Thank you. So this is, I will have our last question. Part of the goal of the Engaged Scholars Initiative is to balance connection with content. And so we've asked you a lot of content questions today, a lot of scholarship questions today. But what is the value of being connected to others in this work?
I can start out by saying that just for me personally, it's been actually a huge grounding force in moving to Philadelphia and being able to become involved with and help develop a project that is so grounded in place. And yeah, I just have gotten to see, I think, in my classes, like how much it has really meant to students in an art class to get to participate in something that's hopefully going to be really long lasting. They may be able to come back and see their student work like as part of this project in 5 to 10 years. And that's really unusual. And just how much it's meant to them to get to work with community partners. Yeah, it means everything to work with others, I think.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with Jody because I mean you can't do this work alone, right? That was like one of the reasons why you wanted to even create this kind of cohort model so that we can, literally be in communication with each other, share, even though we have our own kind of unique scholarly projects, the undercurrent is community engagement, right? And so, what does community engagement look like, at this institution, in this region of the US, and for a staff member, for a faculty member, for a researcher, right? So it's kind of like we all have potentially different roles, and been at our institutions for long time, short time. It's like all of those like nuances and all those factors matter, and so it's helpful to like be in community to say like I'm new to this, I just started, or I'm a staff member, or I'm a faculty member, but the promotion committee like they don't get what I'm doing, like like all of those things are helpful to be able to talk with colleagues that can say, oh, let me tell you what worked for me, or you know what, that happened to me too. Sometimes you just need a man corner. um Sometimes it's not always about coming up with solutions. Sometimes you just need to know that somebody else gets it and feels the same way that you do too, so you feel validated. So I appreciate being a part of this community, and thank you, Nicole, for creating that opportunity for us.
Yes, I think for me, it's all about validation and relevancy. There are clearly other people doing this work, and that's really helpful for me to hear. And again, the growing pains, the validation of just, yes, you can get somewhere, you can bridge some gaps, and you can, work across academic affairs and student affairs and everything like that. So, yeah, I think to echo both Miranda and Jody, connection, collaboration is just essential in this work.
And I'm just gonna add one last thing. Like, I feel like what's unique about ESI versus some of the other like kind of communities of practice that I've joined is that it's intentionally interdisciplinary, and like it cuts across roles, like academic roles, because sometimes there's a tendency for, oh, I'm a faculty member, so I just join other faculty groups, right? And I appreciate actually being in this group where not everybody's faculty. Some people have, administrative, their staff roles, right? Some people are just 100% like research faculty, like they just do research. Others just do teaching. Others like me do both, right? So I feel like having those perspectives are so necessary. And again, like Jody, her background is in art. You have somebody else's background in the actual service, learning. Somebody else's background, like mine is, health equity. Like, and we all value community engagement, right? So it's like I just feel like having those multiple perspectives to bear on the same, kind of value set is really invaluable.
So I guess you guys realize that when my picture pops up, it means that we're close to the end. So first of all, I just want to thank Blaine, Miranda, and Jody for being here today, for sharing your stories with everyone here at this symposium, for sharing your stories and sharing your yourselves with the Engaged Scholars Initiative. What people I think and really can't grasp is the amount of sharing and connection that happens through the cohort process, both in person and online. And so I just really am appreciative that you share that with other people and they get to see it. Additionally, I want to thank Ben and Tomoko and Nimesh and Katie and everyone at Swarthmore and at the Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility. It's been always an amazing journey and an amazing time. And then finally, I just want to make sure that people are tuning back in tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to if I'm supposed to hand it over to Ben or Nimesh, but I am going to say that tomorrow you're going to have another great session from noon to 1:30 p.m. in collaboration with the Coalition of Urban and Metropolitan Universities. And so it's about making our work public. And if you haven't planned or you didn't sign up or whatever it is, you should sign up and be a part of that. And then I'm going to just sort of look over and see if Ben or Nimesh or anyone wants to say a last couple words. Otherwise, I think, we ended it on a really, really great note with all of the great. So it's all me. It's all ESI. So again, thank you, Blaine, Miranda, and Jody, and we will see you all tomorrow.